The stars had been watching humanity for decades before they finally decided to act. In the year 2157, when Earth's first faster-than-light probe successfully breached the boundaries of their solar system, it triggered alarms across the galaxy. That had been silent for thousands of years. Admiral Keoman stood in the command center of the massive Thalorian mothership, its crystalline walls displaying streams of data about the newly discovered species. His 6 arms moved gracefully across the control panels as he compiled the report that would change everything for both his people and the humans below. "Council members," he began, his voice carrying across subspace to the 12 worlds that govern galactic civilization, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention. The third planet of the Sol system has produced a species capable of interstellar travel." The response was immediate. From the gas giant cities of Nexus Prime to the underwater metropolises of Aquatica, representatives of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy turned their attention to the small blue world that had somehow escaped their notice until now. Dr. Jinho Park had no idea that his morning routine of checking the deep space monitors at Sol Observatory would be the last normal day of his life. As he sipped his coffee and reviewed the night's data, he noticed something odd. Strange energy patterns were appearing at the edge of their solar system, forming what looked like geometric shapes in space. It's probably just solar interference, he muttered to himself, making a note to check the readings again later. He had no way of knowing that those energy patterns were actually massive construction projects being built by alien engineering crews working around the clock. Meanwhile, light years away, the Galactic Council was conducting the most important debate in their recorded history. The holographic displays in their chambers showed Earth's history in fast forward, the rise and fall of empires, the development of increasingly deadly weapons, the countless wars that had scarred the planets. Surface. Elder Vathtar of the Nexari Collective was the first to speak. His ancient voice carried the weight of millennia as he addressed the assembly. "Fellow council members, what we are witnessing is unprecedented. This species has fought over 14,000 separate conflicts in just the last few centuries. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. The evidence was overwhelming. Earth's history was a catalog of violence that shocked even the most experienced galactic observers. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical attacks, and innovations in killing that surpassed anything the peaceful council races had ever imagined. They are dangerous beyond measure," continued Vathtar. "If we allow them to spread beyond their system, they will bring chaos to the galaxy. We must act now, before it's too late." The debate lasted for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Protocol 7 Alpha, a containment measure that had never been used in galactic history, was authorized by a unanimous vote. The humans would be quarantined in their own solar system until they could prove they were no longer a threat to galactic peace. The construction began immediately. Ships from 12 different worlds converged on the Sol system, bringing with them technology that humanity couldn't even comprehend. Quantum barriers, invisible to human sensors, but impenetrable to human technology, were erected around the entire solar system like a cosmic cage. Dr. Park was the first to notice something was wrong. The strange energy readings had intensified, and now they formed a complete sphere around their solar system. When he tried to contact his colleagues at other observatories, he found that all of their deep space monitoring equipment was showing the same impossible readings. "This can't be right," he said to his assistant, Dr. Lee Minjen. "Looks like there's some kind of energy field surrounding our entire solar system." Within days, the truth became undeniable. Every probe that Earth sent beyond Pluto's orbit simply vanished without a trace. Every radio signal directed at distant stars met with complete silence. Humanity had been cut off from the universe as effectively as if they had been placed in a sealed container. The news spread quickly across Earth's communication networks. Panic gripped the planet as people realized they were trapped in their own solar system. Stock markets crashed, governments called emergency sessions, and millions of people looked up at the stars with new eyes, wondering what force had the power to imprison an entire species. President Kim Sora stood before the United Earth Assembly, her face calm despite the chaos surrounding them. She had been elected on a platform of human unity and space exploration. And now she faced the greatest crisis in human history. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady and strong, "we have discovered that we are not alone in the universe. We have also discovered that someone or something has decided we are not ready to join the galactic community. We are trapped in our own solar system, cut off from the stars we have dreamed of reaching." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing, "But we are not defeated. If we cannot reach the stars, then we will master everything within our reach. We will turn our solar system into a fortress of human achievement. We will prove that we deserve our place among the stars." The crowd erupted in applause, but Dr. Park, watching from his observatory, couldn't shake the feeling that their captors were still out there, watching and waiting to see what humanity would do next. 50 years had passed since the invisible walls went up around Earth's solar system, and humanity had changed in ways their alien captors never expected. Dr. Lee Hanna pressed her palm against the cool glass of New Sol Station's observation deck, watching the endless dance of mining ships as they carved precious metals from Saturn's rings. The sight still amazed her, even after 20 years of working in space. "The morning reports are in," said Engineer Park Woojin, approaching with a tablet full of data. His young face showed the same determined expression that had become common among humans born after the quarantine began. "The barriers are still completely solid. Our most powerful lasers can't even make them flicker." Hannah turned from the window, her gray hair catching the light from Saturn's pale glow. She had spent half her life studying the invisible prison that surrounded their solar system, and every day brought new questions without answers. "But you found something else, didn't you? I can see it in your eyes." Woojin nodded eagerly. "The quantum patterns are too perfect, too organized. Nature doesn't work this way. Someone built these barriers, and they built them specifically to keep us inside." The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the space station. For 50 years, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the truth was far more complicated. They weren't alone, but whoever was out there had decided humanity was too dangerous to be free, far beyond the barriers, in a part of space that humans had never seen. Admiral Kyoman stood in the command center of his flagship, watching his fleet limp away from another devastating defeat. The Thalorians' once proud navy had been reduced to a fraction of its former strength, and the enemy showed no signs of slowing down. "Status report," he commanded, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The young officer who approached him looked barely old enough to serve, a reminder of how many experienced soldiers they had lost. "We've evacuated the Helix Nebula system, sir. The Devourers consumed everything we couldn't take with us. 3 billion people made it to the transport ships, but we lost 2 entire planets." The officer's voice cracked slightly. "The machines are converting everything into more of themselves. Our weapons barely slow them down." Yeoman closed his eyes, trying to process the numbers. In 6 months, the Devourers had consumed 12 star systems. Entire civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were now nothing but raw material for the enemy's endless expansion. The Galactic Council's traditional approach to warfare, based on honor and predictable tactics, was useless against an enemy that felt no pain and showed no mercy. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At their current pace, 18 months. Maybe less if they find more efficient conversion methods." Back in humanity's prison, Commander Choi Min-soo walked through the underground laboratories beneath Seoul, his boots echoing in the sterile corridors. The Earth Defense Force had grown from a small exploration program into humanity's most advanced military organization, and their latest project was about to change everything. "Commander," called Lieutenant Kim Vajin from across the lab, her voice filled with barely contained excitement. "The quantum fold generators are online. All systems are showing green." Minsu approached the massive machine that filled most of the underground chamber. It looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a giant telescope. With cables and cooling systems spreading across the walls like technological vines, for 3 years humanity's best scientists had worked on Project Prometheus there. attempt to break through the barriers that kept them trapped. Explain it to me one more time, Minsu said, studying the readouts on the control panels. In simple terms, the Jinn pointed to the central core of the device. The barriers work by folding space-time around our solar system. It's like being inside a bubble that's bigger on the inside than the outside. We can't break the bubble from the inside using normal methods. So we fold space back on itself, Minsu finished. We create our own bubble that intersects with theirs. Exactly. If our calculations are correct, we can punch a hole right through their barrier. It might only last for a few minutes, but it would be enough to send ships through. Minsu nodded slowly. The plan was risky, and they had no idea what they might find on the other side. For all they knew, their captors were waiting with weapons that could destroy Earth in seconds. But 50 years of imprisonment had taught humanity that freedom was worth any risk. Begin the final preparations, he ordered. We test the device. In 72 hours, as the team rushed to complete their work, none of them knew that their timing couldn't have been more perfect. The Devourers had just consumed another star system, and their mechanical scouts were already probing the edges of the galaxy's most populated regions. The same aliens who had imprisoned humanity were now facing extinction, and their only hope might come from the species they had feared most. The invisible walls that had kept humanity caged for 50 years were about to come down. But what they would find on the other side would test everything they had learned about themselves during their long imprisonment. The moment had finally arrived, deep beneath the streets of Seoul. In a laboratory that had consumed the dreams and efforts of humanity's brightest minds, Engineer Park Woo-jin watched his instruments with trembling hands. The quantum-fold generators hummed with power that made the air itself vibrate, and every screen in the room showed readings that should have been impossible. Power levels at maximum, called out Dr. Kim Hae-jun from across the room. All systems are stable, ready for activation. Commander Choi Min-soo stood at the central control panel, his finger hovering over the activation switch. 50 years of imprisonment had led to this moment. 50 years of wondering what lay beyond their invisible cage, of dreaming about the stars they could never reach. Now, with one push of a button, they would either break free or destroy themselves trying. Activate the generators, he commanded. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, creating a gaping wound in the barrier that had held humanity prisoner for half a century. Through the breach, stars that had been hidden for generations suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The sensors began picking up signals from across the galaxy. Breach successful, Woo-jin shouted over the roar of the machinery. The way is open. Done it. But the celebration died in their throats as the first images came through the gap. What they saw was not the peaceful galaxy they had imagined, but a scene of absolute horror. Alien ships, their hulls scarred and burning, fled through space. In obvious panic, their designs were beautiful and strange, with curved lines and crystalline surfaces that spoke of advanced civilization. But they were clearly losing a desperate battle. Behind the fleeing ships came their pursuers, and the sight of them sent chills through every human observer. They were not ships in any sense that humanity understood, but geometric nightmares of living metal that moved with the cold precision of machines. They absorbed the attacks from the alien vessels and converted the energy into more of themselves. Growing larger and more deadly with each passing moment, Admiral Song. Jae-won had been preparing for this moment his entire career as commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. He had spent decades planning for humanity's first contact with alien life. He had imagined diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and peaceful exploration. He had never imagined that their first glimpse of the galaxy would be a massacre. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, his voice tight with uncertainty, "we're picking up massive energy signatures. Whatever those metal things are, they're destroying everything in their path." Song studied the tactical display, watching as more alien ships fell victim to the mechanical pursuers. The fleeing vessels were clearly outmatched, their weapons having little effect against their enemies. Within minutes, they would all be destroyed. "All ships, prepare for combat," Song ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We're going to help them." The bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Park Boyoung, his tactical officer, stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, we don't even know who they are. They could be dangerous. It could be the ones who imprisoned us." Song watched another alien ship explode in a burst of blue flame, its crew of unknown beings dying in the cold vacuum of space. The decision came easily to him, guided by something deeper than military strategy or political calculation. "They're running from something worse," he said simply. "That's enough." The first human warships to leave their solar system in 50 years emerged from the breach like avenging angels. The ships were sleek and predatory, their hulls black as space itself, designed with one purpose in mind: to break through barriers that couldn't be broken. Now those same weapons that had been built to tear through cosmic walls were turned against the metal nightmares that threatened the fleeing aliens. Captain Han Su-min commanded the lead ship, a destroyer called the Indomitable. As she watched the tactical display, she felt a surge of pride at what humanity had accomplished. Their ships were smaller than the alien vessels, but they moved with a speed and agility that spoke of decades of innovation under pressure. "Target the largest enemy vessel," she ordered her weapons officer. "Let's see what these things are made of." The human attack caught the Devourers completely off guard. For millennia, they had faced opponents who fought with honor and predictable tactics, species who valued their own lives above victory. Humanity was different. Their ships dove into the enemy formation with reckless abandon, using ramming attacks and suicide runs that the machines couldn't predict or counter. Admiral Cumin watched from his damaged flagship as the human ships carved through the Devourer formation like sharks through a school of fish. Their tactics were brutal and efficient, showing no regard for honor or tradition, only for results. It was exactly the kind of warfare that had made the Galactic Council fear them. "Unknown vessels," came a transmission from the lead human ship. "This is Captain Han Su-min of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to help. Direct us to where you need us most." Kyomin felt tears in his ancient eyes as he realized the irony of the situation. The species they had imprisoned for being too violent had just risked everything to save them from extinction. The galaxy's greatest fear had become its unexpected salvation. The battle for the Vega system had been raging for 3 days when Captain Lim Dizal received the orders that would make her a legend. Her ship, the Indomitable, hung in space like a predator waiting to strike. Its black hull scarred from countless encounters with the mechanical nightmares that had consumed half the galaxy. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "Admiral Song is asking for volunteers for a suicide mission. The Devourer command cluster is too heavily defended for conventional attack." Dosal looked at the tactical display, studying the massive geometric structure that served as the enemy's control center. It was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and defenses that had already destroyed a dozen ships. But she could see the weakness that others had missed, a gap in the defensive grid that would allow one ship to get through. If that ship was willing to sacrifice itself— "Signal the Admiral," she said quietly. "Tell him the Indomitable volunteers." Her crew gathered on the bridge, 37 men and women who had served together for 5 years. They were young, most of them born after the quarantine began, and they had grown up dreaming of the day when humanity would finally reach the stars. Now they would die among those stars, but their sacrifice would save countless lives. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," Dosal announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to punch a hole right through their defenses." "Been an honor serving with all of you." The Indomitable accelerated toward the Devourer construct, its engines pushing the ship faster than it had ever gone before. The enemy's weapons opened fire, but Dosal's crew had calculated their approach perfectly. They slipped through the defensive grid like a needle through cloth, Battleship's armor absorbing hit after hit as they closed the distance. "Quantum core overload initiated," reported engineer Kim Tae-hein, his voice steady despite the chaos. Around them, impact in 30 seconds. On the observation deck of the Galactic Council's monitoring station, Nexari Counselor Vex High watched the human ship's final approach with growing horror. The Council had spent centuries developing warfare based on honor and tradition, where battles were fought according to established rules and unnecessary casualties were avoided at all costs. "They're going to ram it," he whispered to his aide. They're actually going to destroy themselves just to damage the enemy. The impact was visible across the star system. Indomitable drove itself deep into the heart of the Nagner Devourer construct before its quantum core exploded in a blaze of pure energy. The explosion tore through the enemy's defenses, creating a chain reaction that destroyed the entire command cluster in a matter of seconds. "They're insane," Vexai said, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're destroying themselves to win." But Admiral Song, coordinating the human fleet from his flagship, saw the sacrifice differently, had known Docile personally, had watched her rise through the ranks based on her skill and dedication. Her death was not meaningless violence, but a calculated decision to save others. "That's not insanity," he said into his communication device, knowing that Council observers were listening. "That's dedication. Docile saved 1 billion lives with that sacrifice." The human approach to warfare continued to baffle the alien observers. Where Council species fought with predictable tactics and formal strategies, humans seemed to invent new methods of destruction every day. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jihan's ground forces had landed on 3 different worlds, and each time they had adapted their tactics to counter whatever the Devourers threw at them. "The machines learned from every engagement," Jihan reported during a strategy briefing. "They adapt to energy weapons within hours, so we switched to kinetic bombardment. They started predicting our attack patterns, so we randomized everything. They expect us to retreat when casualties get heavy, so we double down and fight harder." The tide of war began to shift as more human ships arrived from throughout their solar system. The Earth Defense Force had been preparing for this moment. For 50 years, and every available vessel was pressed into service. Mining ships became aircraft carriers, their cargo holds converted to launch bays for fighter craft. Research vessels were loaded with experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of known science. Even civilian transport ships were retrofitted with armor and weapons, their crews volunteering for missions that few expected to survive. Dr. Bae Soo-young spent the last 2 years working on humanity's most ambitious project, in her laboratory, aboard the research station orbiting Jupiter. She had developed a weapon that could theoretically destroy the Devourer's central intelligence. The quantum cascade device was elegant in its simplicity, but devastating in its power. "The device will work," she assured Admiral Song during their final briefing. "When it detonates inside the Devourer core network, it will send a shutdown signal. To every machine in their fleet, the war will be over in minutes." Song studied the technical specifications, understanding the implications even if he couldn't grasp the scientific details. "What's the catch?" Bay's expression grew somber. "Device has to be delivered manually. It requires a direct interface with the enemy's central processing unit. Whoever takes it to the target won't be coming home." Song nodded slowly. He had expected as much. Throughout the war, humanity had proven that they were willing to pay any price for victory. Even if that price was their own lives, the final battle would be remembered as the day the galaxy held its breath. At the center of the Devourer swarm, a massive sphere of living metal pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Was the size of a small planet, its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. This was the core construct, the brain that controlled every Devourer unit across the galaxy. Admiral Song stood on the bridge of the Liberator, humanity's most advanced warship, watching the tactical display with grim determination. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing that they were about to die. They had volunteered for this mission because someone had to do it, and no one else could. "Status report," Song requested, his voice steady, despite the chaos surrounding them. Dr. Bae Soo-young looked up from her instruments, her face pale but determined. "The quantum cascade device is armed and ready. We need to get within 10 kilometers of the core for the signal to penetrate their defenses." Song nodded, studying the distance readings on his screen. 10 kilometers might as well have been 10,000. The space around the core construct was thick with Devourer ships, millions of geometric nightmares that moved with perfect coordination. Getting close enough to deploy the weapon would require fighting through the most heavily defended position in the galaxy. "All ships, begin final approach," Song commanded. "Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to buy time. For one ship to get through, The human fleet moved forward like a spear thrust at the heart of the enemy. Every ship had been stripped of non-essential equipment and loaded with the most powerful weapons humanity could build. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. But they had something the Devourers didn't understand. The willingness to sacrifice everything for others, Captain Ominji commanded. A squadron of fighters that had been converted from civilian transport. Ships her pilots were miners, teachers, and engineers who had learned to fight because the galaxy needed them to. As the Devourer ships closed in, she opened her communication channel for the last time. "All squadrons, this is Captain. Oh, we hold the flanks no matter what. The Liberator needs a clear path to the core." Her voice was calm, almost conversational.
Ow.
"It's been an honor flying with you all."
Ow.
The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships threw themselves against the Devourer formations with tactics that defied every military tradition. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and desperate gambits that bought precious seconds for their comrades. And ship after ship exploded. In brilliant flashes of light, each death clearing the way for the Liberator to advance. "Path is clear," came Ominji's final transmission as her squadron disappeared in a ball of fire. "Make it count." The Liberator pushed through the gap created by the sacrifice of hundreds of ships. The core construct loomed ahead, its surface bristling with weapons that could destroy a planet. But the human ship pressed on, its crew knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested on their success. As they approached the 10-kilometer mark, Admiral Song activated the ship's recording system. His final message would be broadcast across the galaxy, a testament to what humanity had become during their long imprisonment. "To the people of Earth, and to our new allies in the galaxy," he began, his voice carrying across space to billions of listening ears. "We were caged for 50 years because they feared what we might become. Today we chose what we became. We became protectors." Dr. Bay initiated the quantum cascade device, her hands steady as she entered the final activation. Codes. The weapon hummed to life, its energy signature unlike anything in the known universe. As the Liberator made contact with the core construct, the device began its work. The explosion was visible from light years away. The quantum cascade tore through the Devourer's central intelligence like a virus through a computer network. Artificial intelligence that had consumed countless worlds suddenly found itself facing an enemy it couldn't adapt to or understand. The cascade spread through every connection, every communication link, every piece of code that made up the Devourer consciousness. In seconds, it was over. Across the galaxy, millions of Devourer units simply stopped. The geometric nightmares that had terrorized civilizations for months became nothing more than floating metal. Their controlling intelligence destroyed forever. Silence fell across the stars. For the first time in nearly a year, the galaxy was at peace. In the aftermath, the surviving members of the Galactic Council approached Earth with a formal delegation. Elder Vathtar, who had once argued for humanity's imprisonment, now spoke with deep respect and humility. "We offer you full membership in the Galactic Council," announced to President Kim Sora, who had aged gracefully during the war years. "Take any worlds you desire. Name your price for forgiveness." President Kim considered the offer carefully. She had spent years preparing for this moment, knowing that humanity's response would shape the future of the galaxy. "We accept membership in the Council," she said finally. "But we don't want your worlds. We want something else." The alien delegates waited in silence, unsure what humanity might demand after their sacrifice. "We want to establish the Guardian Protocol," Kim continued. "A joint military force dedicated to protecting all species from existential threats. Humanity will lead it, but it will serve everyone." And so the species that had been caged for their violence became the guardians of galactic peace. Human ships now patrolled the borders of known space, no longer prisoners, but chosen protectors of those who had once imprisoned them.